Podcast, The Rhythm. Go live, Vegas on the screen, feeling the flow, so pristine. Boom, as the beats align, electric dreams, they intertwine.
Monday, the Gameday Huddle back in action live from the Go Live Vegas studio. Brett Lawson, Steve Johnson, Jimmy Garino here. We have plenty to talk about, gentlemen. It seems this time of year we cover the full slate in the world of sports, and rightfully so. NBA playoff action is off and running to the point where now we have the conference finals set. Same thing in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Of course, baseball is probably more interesting than it has been at this point in years past. And of course, with the NFL, we have the schedule release in the directly in hindsight, directly in the rearview mirror. But of course, plenty to analyze and discuss in the preview there. Going to be tons of speculation, tons of guessing at this point, but that's part of the fun when talking about the NFL offseason. But obviously, we have to begin with really the only place to begin, I believe, and really the only thing you think of right now when it comes to the world of sports, at least in the immediate sense, is the postseason action, basketball and hockey. I guess the debate could be what do you want to start with on a show like today, or shows like these where we just come on the air weekly. Obviously, it'll fluctuate as we get closer and closer to the Stanley Cup Finals and the NBA Finals. But we're going to start with basketball, fellas, because we have now the Eastern and Western Conference Finals set. I want to start in the East, where the Knicks, first time, Jimmy, since the year 2000, find themselves back in the Eastern Conference Finals against none other than their rivals, a rivalry renewed, the Indiana Pacers. In fact, the last time they found themselves in the Eastern Conference Finals, it was against Indiana. We'll obviously preview that matchup, but from the get-go, we talked about it last week, how this Knicks team were like the buzzing gnats, the mosquitoes that just wouldn't go away. And we saw Boston struggle with exactly that. Boston went cold with their shooting. Boston's offense became completely non-existent. New York's offense capitalizes. And then all of that becomes null and void literally just a few hours after we get off the air last Monday, when Jason Tatum winds up tearing his Achilles. He has a quick turnaround with the surgery. It's in a 12-hour window. But next thing we know, we find out the next day, obviously he's done. And now the immediate question is, what does that mean for the future of his career? And we'll get to that as well. But just your immediate takeaway of the series. So much of what we discussed about the Knicks and their offense last week, Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, right? Mikal Bridges defensively. It's a team that's scrappy. It's a team that may seem like a bit of an overachiever, but it's a team that plays a brand of basketball and a style of basketball that is so difficult to match for the full duration of a game, let alone a full series. Even though the Knicks may not be the best team on paper, it feels like they're the one team that if your back is against the wall, you just don't want them across from you.
Yeah, it just shows in those two games that they were down 20 and they came back and won both of those games.
Yeah.
They're a lineup that's full of a bunch of dogs, not a bunch of big names. Mm-hmm. You got Jalen Brunson, who I guarantee you walked the strip today and asked how many people actually know who Jalen Brunson is.
Right.
They'll tell you not many. And you got Karl Anthony Towns. Yes, he was the number one overall pick way back when, in probably, 2017, I think he was?
15.
15
yeah.
He was. So we're talking 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Anybody even thought of him? He got lost up in Minnesota for so many years that nobody even really cared about what he was doing and who he was.
Even when he was good, he didn't seem relevant.
Yeah,
right.
He was just one of those guys on a crappy team. Mm-hmm. Now you put him and Brunson together, you have – my MVP on that team is Josh Hart. I think he's the heartbeat to that team. He shows everybody what it's going to take to win these games, play great defense, and when you have a shot, you make your shots.
And even the toughness and the attitude with the blood gushing, right? Like that. Those are the images that New York.
That's New York.
Right.
Yeah.
Those are the images New York sports fans love and New York basketball fans have been waiting for. And that's what makes this so prominent to me, fellas, is that we could call it a Cinderella story. We can call it a feel-good type of story if you're a New York sports fan, fine, because, yes, it has been quite some time for the Knicks. But it also shows that nothing lasts forever, because the biggest issue with the Knicks, because even now, the ownership, certain aspects of the front office, a lot of fans will still say that's shaky. But they didn't have the franchise cornerstone type of players that they now have. You bring in Jalen Brunson. He's proven to be that the last couple of years. But now complementing it with Towns, complementing it with Hart, complementing it with Mikal Bridges. A lot of fans were, iffy on that trade. Initially, it didn't look great because he wasn't really doing a whole lot in the scoring. But what he does well is now coming to the forefront. And that, Steve, to me, is really what the Knicks are all about. The things they do well, they emphasize, and the things they don't do well never seem to be an issue because they ensure that you aren't able to capitalize on their flaws. That is in any sport, especially come playoff time. That goes a long way when you could accentuate the positives and essentially eliminate the negatives as a result.
No, absolutely. And, the Knicks got a little bit lucky in this series.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason
real
they
lucky.
did is because
They got a break.
you got, first off, you got Jason Tatum, obviously the injury there. Now we come to find out today that Jaylen Brown was playing with the torn meniscus the entire time, right? So obviously he's not as explosive and dynamic as he would normally be. So I think from that standpoint, they've looked great. I don't know that they're going to outshoot the Pacers unless the Pacers just get cold.
And
I'll tell you right now, that Pacers team, the way that they're built, they can be up 20, 25, 30 on you real quick.
And that's what happened against Cleveland, as we'll go ahead and focus on that as well, because we're going to preview the matchup. But in order to do that, we have to kind of talk about how we got here exactly. And you're right, the Knicks are scrappy. They stay in the fight. They know how to battle out of a corner because they're one of those teams that when they Pacers are a team, though, that don't have to come from behind because, like you said so often, they just explode from the get-go. And we saw that in that final game against Cleveland. That's exactly what happened. We talked all year long, could Cleveland be collectively the best team in the East? And throughout the regular season, they looked like just that. And you have to start to wonder, we mentioned last week how they were the one matchup. Indiana was the one matchup you didn't want to have across from you if you were Cleveland because, hey, we talk about it on the show all the time, styles make fights. You have to wonder now, we'll talk about the card value for Brunson and Halliburton here in a second, but you have to wonder maybe, and we mentioned how they were dangerous, maybe kind of like how we did with Minnesota, we overlooked Indiana a little bit. Not necessarily the three at this table, but just collectively, we may have not given the Pacers the credit they were due. And even looking at Boston and New York, so much of the talk about that series was, when is Boston going to wake up? When are they going to start knocking down the three? Sure, in the back end of the series, you had Derek White playing brilliantly. But as a whole, Al Horford, a little shaky. Porzingis, little hot and cold. All the pieces that were really consistency for Boston last year, that was not the case this time around. So while, the Knicks did have to have a lot of things going their way, I also think now they're playing a team that won't miss on those opportunities. And I think the Knicks will get a couple of wins, and I think, Indiana should be the favorite. I think I'm leaning Indiana to win the series. We'll get more into that in a second. But at the same time, it just feels like all of that to go New York's way, I doubt that will be the case again against Indiana, even if Brunson and Cat and company continue to play brilliantly well.
Look, they're going to play well. And look, OG Anunoby also played well. I think he scored 23 in that final game, right?
He's probably been the X factor.
And he's one of those guys that, look, he is on the court a lot of times when those two guys aren't, right? And he's able to keep the ship moving. That's going to be quality. The problem with this Pacers team for them is just purely going to be this Pacers team is fast. And the difference in this series, I believe, is just going to be that Brunson and Halliburton are just going to offset each other.
Right.
Like almost mark them at zeros, right? And then everyone else score.
They're
and
the
figure out what it is,
stalemate,
right? If puts up 35 points, Halliburton's putting up 35 points. Like, that's just how these games are going to run. I'm going to tell you, this is going to be an exciting Eastern Conference Finals because you're finally going to get to see some real fun, fast basketball.
And that's the key term, fast, because I feel compared to the West, I feel that's going to be more of Team A versus Team B, A lot of strategy, a lot of defense, the physicality, athleticism on both sides, looking at OKC and Minnesota. I think we're going to see a little bit more of a dogfight in that series. I think this series, Jimmy, like Steve just said, is going to be the track meet. We're going to see a lot of explosive shooting. We're going to see a lot of explosive runs. And we're going to see both these teams score in a jiffy. And I think that will be spearheaded by the play of Halliburton and Brunson. And it's so perfect, too, right? Because we're New York fans. And even Steve, being a basketball fan during that time, you know the prominence of the Indiana-New York rivalry. Again, the last time the Knicks were in this very spot, they went down to Indiana. You're going to have Reggie Miller.
We hate Reggie Miller, and he's on the broadcast.
He's in the booth. You're going to have Reggie Miller calling the game. You're going to have Spike Lee behind him. I'm hoping they show footage on the broadcast of Spike Lee and Reggie Miller drawing at it.
You know they're going to be chirping. Yeah.
And he has a headset on, and he's in the booth nowadays. So you're going to have a lot of celebrities. The Garden's going to be popping. Even on the Indiana front, this is big for the Pacers because aside from their rivalry with the Knicks, this is just a big moment for their brand as a whole. Anyway, we were wondering, guys, what type of player Tyrese Halliburton would ultimately be. Now that he's found his home in Indiana, we are seeing just that, much like Brunson has found his home in New York. We have time to continue to kind of give our picks. I myself have on that train as well, Steve.
I do, and I also think it's fair for us to mention too, Indiana making this like Eastern Conference Finals, this is massive for the Halliburton market. Massive for him. Like, there's not another player that I can think that the impact of being this far in the playoffs would have that much hobby impact for them. Halliburton today just leaped a bunch of those guys that just got knocked out of the playoffs in the last two rounds.
And that was going to be
you're going to see this pop. And what I want to talk about here really quick, and I'm sorry to step on you here.
No,
but
please. That was going to be my next question.
That's 2020 class. So that's Halliburton now becoming number 2 in the 2020 class behind Anthony Edwards as far as collectability goes. And LaMelo had been as far as collectability goes. And LaMelo had been sitting there forever, but he just can't get it going, can't do what he needs to. And although that was a strong class, like, now you're starting to see he was for a long time in the hobby community, and Jimmy will tell you this.
No, please.
His stuff, he was the 6th or 7th guy in that 2020 class for a long time.
And see, Jimmy, he says we can't start the show without him. BS, we definitely need him because it's tidbits like that I wanted to go to next. Because, again, we could talk about the X's and O's, the matchup itself. I mean, sometimes I've said this before. I wish we have a daily show sometimes so we could do just that. But covering on a weekly basis, we'll be able to touch base on this again. But I did want to emphasize the card markets here. And since Steve kind of segued it there, because I am always so curious about the guys who get off fast in their NBA careers and go to a place and wind up staying in that place, whether it be a big market, some type of notable market. They may be a star in college and they're instantly a star in the league. But someone like Halliburton, where the signs were always there in terms of the talent, but now we're seeing the return on investment in a different location. How is tracking that throughout the postseason and the early years of a player's career differ? How does that differ, Jimmy, than someone who right off the bat is considered like the golden boy, blue chip type of franchise player? Because I think it's interesting because sometimes we see that, especially in basketball.
Yeah, with basketball, you do see that a lot more than any other sport. Cause
late bloomers.
Yes, it's always, the 3rd or 4th year they need to get in there because first off, a lot of these guys are one and done.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize that when they go into college, they're 17, 18 years old.
Kids.
They go into college, they play their 1 year. They're still 18, 19 years old. Yep. These guys have not came into the body. Not everybody's a Kobe Bryant. Not everybody's a KJ or Kevin Garnett.
Yep.
Not everybody's like that, where you can come in at 19, 20 years old and be a boy and play with men. You're seeing that now when we thought it was going to be Zion Williams. We thought it was going to be these guys like that. No, it takes time in the NBA.
Yeah.
You're playing against grown men.
And that's why even talking about March Madness, Cooper Flagg, it's going to be interesting because, he's the superstar. He's the big name. He's a phenom. He's a freak of nature. But at the same time, this takes time because you are playing with literally a different type of human
I'm
being.
glad you
No
brought
doubt
him
about it.
up because I did want to point this out, and I was going to save it, but since you mentioned him, did you see the reaction that he gave when he found out the Mavericks got the number 1 overall pick
in the lottery?
He was beyond disappointed.
Yeah.
Oh, he didn't want to go there?
No, because the odds were to go to San Antonio.
Oh, he
San
wanted to go play
Antonio
with
had
Victor,
that.
yeah.
Of course.
That would be
you?
insane, yeah.
Right? And that's what happened. That got missed, and now he's got to go to this rolling dumpster fire that's in Dallas that has the NBA basically being mocked and scoffed right now on the draft because of the fact that they won that after trading Luka. And it's like, really? It's really hard to not buy that storyline as a storyline.
Fire Nico.
When you look at the percentage of what they were supposed to essentially their projection to actually get that before it happened, you wouldn't have guessed in a million years.
1.8% or something like that.
And it quickly, like Steve said, that's almost the running narrative, the main story, the number one headline in the NBA right now. It says a lot that you could have the Knicks and the Pacers in the final. You could have Minnesota and OKC really coming to fruition.
So do you guys think
this? And yet we don't care. We care about the conspiracy.
Do you think this is a changing of the guard in the NBA? Because now you look at the teams that are in. You got Minnesota Timberwolves. Right. You have the OKC Thunder, Indiana Pacers, New York Knicks. None of these teams have been really relevant.
Well, and even the teams that have been in it, because if you go and you then talk about Cleveland, right, being in there, right, that's a team that hasn't had
they're new to the mix,
and it's all new players except for Spider-Man, right? But everyone else is there. I think I think that last year was truly the changing of the guard. I think that that's when we saw it, which is why we saw the Celtics rise to the top, because now Giannis is out of the way, now LeBron's out of the way, now Durant's out of the way, Jokic's out of the way. Like just go down the list, like you start to see it. Right. So now that those guys are out of the way, you start seeing it. What I think's really unique here too, though, is let's talk about what happened in Minnesota, because this is so missed, right? They traded Clarkson to Utah. Mm-hmm. They end up getting, guys back there, right? Then they turn around and they trade Karl Anthony Towns.
And
that's now making the playoff appearance, and now he's in the finals on his side, and Minnesota's in the finals on their side.
And let's talk about the big men, too. Karl Anthony Towns goes to New York. In turn, Julius Randle's in Minnesota, and both are playing really fantastic. Well. Like, they're the straws that are stirring the drink. And, you could talk about Ant as you rightfully should. You could talk about Jalen Brunson as you rightfully should. But they've been the difference makers. And I like the fact that you bring that up, Jimmy. It feels like a changing of the guard for the simple fact that not only are there new teams on the scene, but the old guard now has to go through a recalibration period. And that's why I'm talking about the West now is so interesting. I want to put the focus on the Timberwolves and the Thunder, don't get me wrong. But look at the Warriors. They got to go back to the drawing board now. Steph Curry isn't lighting it up. That is a team that is
and Draymond's gone most likely, right?
And Draymond, at this point, we've known the past couple of years, Draymond's on his way out anyway. Steph Curry, when he's healthy, he's having trouble consistently staying healthy. When he is, obviously, they're a force, but you can't hang your hat on that. And then Denver at this point has to completely rebuild. Jamal Murray, right? Michael Porter, those guys are great players, and when they're healthy, they bring enough to the table where I think you can get some capital, some volume for them to push them off, to shop them off, and then bring in players that can complement Jokic. Because I get it. Jokic and Murray a few years ago, they were the dynamic duo. When he's healthy, they're a great 1-2 punch. At this point, that's over. At this point, you know what you have. You have the best player in the world, and it's time to build around him. And you're going to have to shop some guys off to do that. But it's interesting because we're having this conversation about a team that just 2 years ago was hoisting the Larry O'Brien, right? A team that has the best player on the world on it right now, and yet they go to Game 7, but we saw what happened yesterday against OKC in that game. It got rough, it got ugly, and they got on them so fast, and there was no way for Denver to stop the bleeding. So I think that's a great point. We are seeing these teams now kind of have to go back to the drawing board, and that's good because the great organizations, the great coaches, the great front office they know how to do that, and the ones that struggle with it, well, that's what essentially shapes the league for years to come. But looking at this series, guys, OKC, Minnesota, a lot of manpower, a lot of physicality, and a lot of athleticism. Jimmy, about the series itself, because, again, we'll be on the air again next week to talk more about it. What stands out to you initially? I'm just interested to see Shai versus Anthony Edwards. That's all I want to see. That's the heavyweight fight. Yeah, it's those two guys going at it. Whoever has the best series wins that series. Yep. If Anthony Edwards takes over, they win the series. If Shai takes over, they win the series. It's whoever their big catalyst, their MVP, their guy that they ride behind, whoever has the best series is going to win that series. And I think it's going to be Shai. I think they have more depth on that team. More ways to hurt you, more ways to score. And you saw it against Denver just yesterday that they were down like 6 early in the first quarter. Then all of a sudden I turned the score back on, and then they're up 17. And I'm like,
Wait, what the hell? That was a matter of like 4 minutes.
You turn on the PGA to watch Scotty Scheffler for 5 minutes, and you think, all right, commercial, I'll go back to the NBA game. Oh, my God, it was just an absolute devastation.
Yeah, and he ran away with it. He's one of the best. Well, he is the best player in the world.
Oh, no doubt about it. That's what another cool thing is. Like, when you get great sports weekends, you have a Subway Series, you have the PGA, you have playoff basketball, playoff hockey, so obviously the NFL schedule release. Like, this was a jam-packed sports weekend. You have a huge fight schedule, a huge fight slate coming up in the summer. We're going to have a lot to talk about here on the show in the next couple of weeks. But, Steve, do you have similar sentiments to what Jimmy is saying? Because it's easy to immediately just kind of break down the aspects of SGA versus Ant-Man. That's what it really is going to – that's what's going to write the story when it's all said and done. But are there any other ancillary factors that you think could determine this one? Because that's why, again, I think Julius Randle is kind of the unsung hero. I get that we're not talking about him enough, but he has been the difference for them so far in the postseason. And I think if they're going to take it to OKC and a team that could score and be as productive as OKC, he's going to have to be an absolute monster.
You know, I'm highly, highly on OKC. I've been on OKC since the middle of the year. I've been talking about them. I thought they were the team. I thought this was the year that they would win it. I still feel like this is the year that they will win it.
Yeah.
I think Minnesota is a different draw for them than maybe what would have been better for them. But also I think this last series, and look, Jokic did everything he could to be disruptive.
He was incredible.
Right? So he played incredibly well in the series. And because of it, you saw them get taxed in time. Whereas, like, you got minutes, you know, the Pacers haven't played since last Tuesday. Right? They got a week off, right?
And they were kicking ass. Where OKC, it went to Game 7. It was a dominant Game 7, but still, it was a little bit more of a battle.
But they both turn right back around and have to play again.
Yeah.
I think when it comes down to it, as much as I want to sit here and say it's the Ant-Man shy show, because it is, that's what we're tuning in to watch, I actually think this is about who's going to be able to throw down threes. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be whichever team scores more threes is going to win. And it's just going to be that the entire series, because these teams are set up to where neither one of them offensively rebound incredibly well. They don't have a bunch of putbacks. They're not those type of teams, right? They got guys that can turn it on. Look, Anthony Edwards, he'll grab boards. Obviously, you've got big guys there that'll grab boards, right? You go to the other side, you've got guys all over the place that grab boards there, and I mean, it's all spread out.
And if you look at the defense, this is really kind of just isolating what we saw recently. But Alex Caruso, he brought it against Jokic. He gave the best player and one of the all-time great posts we have ever seen in the league all that he could handle and then some.
That white boy can play.
Yeah.
He can play.
And that's what's so interesting about OKC, because that's why, even with all the other teams that have been relevant in the conversation throughout the regular season, throughout the early part of the postseason, OKC can beat you in so many ways. And even though it is the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander show, ultimately, we know that he doesn't have to have his best game, and they could still get the job done. There's a big premium for that sometimes in a star-powered league like the NBA gets forgotten about.
I think that maybe your matchup you should be looking at is Jaden McDaniels and Chet Holmgren.
Yeah.
Right. Those guys. If one of those two guys is outscoring the other guy, I think that's where you'll see a massive difference.
The contribution.
Right? Because they both have been running about the same clip in the playoffs. And I mean, look, if I did the blind test, Jimmy, and I said Chet or McDaniels, you're going with
probably McDaniels.
McDaniels right now.
Yeah.
But we all know that if he's 100% healthy, we actually think
Chet at one point was talked about going to be the next superstar.
The next freak. The next freak. Yeah.
And
next big thing.
He got injured.
Handle, he could shoot. Yes, he was out for
Gets
a whole
injured.
year.
He was out for the year. And then you got to have that rebound, right? And it always takes quite a while to rebound, especially a big guy like that.
And
so
the best we're seeing of him, we're still probably yet to see. That's what makes it so special.
Which is why don't be surprised if he goes off here. Right? If he just goes off and all of a sudden he's scoring like 25 a night and you're like, where did this come from?
These are where the great players do it.
We knew this is where it was going to come from.
This type of stage. These are where the great players do it. And really quick before we go to break, because again, this is going to be a lot of fun to just analyze every angle, every nook and cranny of both these matchups in the East and West. But I want to go back to the card markets. Steve, you mentioned the ascension of Tyrese Halliburton Do we see anyone else here in the next couple of weeks, whether it be the semifinals or the finals themselves, who have a similar type of trajectory?
Probably Jaden McDaniels. I think he's probably the one because, it's funny, during the 2021 class, like, when you were doing breaks and people were doing sports card breaks, you'd pull up and you'd see rookie and you'd see Timberwolves and you'd be like, oh, it's Jaden McDaniels. And now, if that was the case, you'd be like, okay, it's Jaden McDaniels.
Not bad.
Like, not bad, right?
Yeah.
Tells you just how things change when a guy gets an opportunity to play and whatever it is.
Earns his stripes.
And we've seen this happen multiple times where a guy in the playoffs, right? Think of that Dallas run last year, right? And how that benefited guys on that Dallas team that didn't have the voice that they do now, right? And then I think of the Jonathan Kuminga run where Kuminga became a big talked about name because of the fact he was doing so well.
Look at
State,
the
Right.
look at the Raptors in 2019. Fred VanVleet, Siakam, all those guys who obviously it was the Kawhi Leonard show, but all those complimentary pieces, that was the difference.
Well, you're looking at that team now. In Pascal Siakam he
Son.
got traded over to the Pacers,
And he's
now
crucial.
he at times looks like he's the best player on the floor. You watch him play, you're like, holy shit, this guy can play. And you forget back, he won a championship. It's
Yep.
like, wait, oh yeah, he was on that Raptors team that they just ran through everybody.
And that's what's cool about the NBA because, yes, I get it. It's a star-driven league, but sometimes we almost we're overly obsessed with the upper echelon, the top 15 of the league, so much so to the point where we forget about everyone else. The NFL, we may have a hierarchy. We may rank the elite quarterbacks. We may rank the elite, sellers in the market, the elite fantasy guys, the elite this, the elite that. The clutch players, the guys who show up in the playoffs, but we still, I feel, pay attention to the middle, the secondary, the tertiary rankings.
I think that's more so of fantasy football,
Right.
because
Yeah.
everybody plays fantasy football.
Right.
So not only do you know not
deep.
the A-list players, but you know the B's, the C's,
Well,
and the
you're-
D's
and
in
the way-
the NFL.
and the way
And in the
people bet
NFL,
football.
you're a week by week, so you're spending a week
Yes.
putting your roster together and figuring all that stuff out.
You mull it over a lot longer.
One thing I wanted to mention really quick: Pascal Siakam, 18.8 points on average so far in the playoffs, and Tyrese Halliburton 17.5.
There you go.
So your eye test is exactly what the stat sheet says, right?
Yeah.
And he brings that to the table, and it goes unsaid, and that's what's so cool about this.
Do you know
this,
what gets missed in this whole discussion until you look at this and you see
Tell
it?
me.
Miles Turner scoring 16.5 points a game.
That's what I'm saying. They're getting contribution
That right
everywhere.
there, that's where I'm telling you that this Pacers team, if 2 of the 4 click, they can run. And I think that's interesting. And I think OKC's built this way too, right? I really do. I think OKC has that. Because they have Williams too. And see, that he's the forgotten guy. And Williams was the ascending rookie last year,
They
right?
have an arsenal. Yep.
So from that, and man, I start thinking about it, and I'm like, man, you think about OKC, and you think about Williams is an up and coming, like budding, borderline almost star at this point, right? He's one of those guys that he's right there. He's got now the MVP playing on his team, and we're talking about Chet Holmgren being a guy that was supposed to be and could very well be.
And you know what that's a reflection of, Steve? It's a reflection of how the game has changed. The era of superstar teams, right? These like what was the with the player empowerment, the big threes. I'm drawing a blank on exactly what, but either way, like dream team, the dream team type of approach, the mega team.
Well,
type
Jimmy's
of
always
approach.
said that you have to have three superstars
no
on the
doubt.
team.
And it got to the point where you had to have 3, even if you had nothing else. Now you're seeing teams kind of take the sum of the whole type of approach. The sum of the parts can be greater, or the whole can be greater than the individual parts. These super teams, like these guys that are calculatingly in the offseason, just bolstering their rosters. That worked for a long time. I think it's better for the association now that we're seeing a different approach. This entire NBA postseason, these Eastern Conference, Western Conference finals, the NBA finals that will be on after them, it seems like this is the kind of year it needed, right? Because at the time when so much about the NBA with the resting and with the regular season not mattering and with certain aspects of, the business model maybe not as applicable as it once was.
Yeah.
It seems like everything in the NBA, I'm not going to say is necessarily heading south or trending downwards, but it seems like there's certain parts of it that are in limbo. I think a year like this, with teams like this, where you see teams that have well-balanced rosters that do have star talent, but also know how to build around the star talent with veteran role players. I think that's good for the game because it shows there's a different way. You don't have to build up these superstar teams, and you don't have to live and die by the big three that is only going to be there in your individual market for maybe 2 or 3 years anyway. You see a little bit of longevity. You see a little bit of a long-term investment. And because of that, you get a damn good NBA playoff. So it'll be interesting to watch. But we got to go to a break really quick. We talk about conspiracies in the National Basketball Association. Apparently, before Steve even got in the studio, we heard a conspiracy from our producer, Aaron Ellikis, related to the world of hockey. And the world of hockey is where we're going next. So don't go anywhere. We're going from the hardwood to the ice, talking Stanley Cup playoffs and whatever the hell's in Aaron's mind regarding Gary Bettman. So don't go anywhere. It's the Game Day Huddle live from the Go Live Vegas studio on a Monday. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow us on all of our platforms so you can join in on the conversation as well.
Peppermint Patty's the worst. Comic-Con.com, your daily comic convention online. Insightful reviews, previews of the comics, toys, and games you need to know. Delightful chats with luminaries from around the geek spectrum. In print, on video, and everywhere in between. The show never stops on Comic-Con.com.
Come on down to the good old bar. Craft beer is never too far. I do every night. Do what through and get it right. Raise the glass, raise your hat. The booze, Francis, dance around, let them play. Voodoo Ball's a place to stay.
Stop the dance, feel the thrill, chase the legends the dreams fulfill. In the game, where your story goes, it's all here again the next month. Yeah! Unleash wind, fuel the fire, let the play begin. And this monster ignites your flame, every pop, every dream, every game.
Go Live Vegas Studios, a unique multi-camera social media virtual content creators paradise. We offer high-end services using live streaming and film production for your personal or corporate, commercial or event and campaign needs. Pre-record or live stream to your audience on multiple social media platforms simultaneously. Fun and interactive with social media comments, phone lines, live remotes, audio Foley sounds, and Snapchat filters. Be creative, get recognized, and make money. We help you by providing an all in-house production team. Visit our website at golive.vegas.
All right, keeping the conversation go even when we're off the air. That's how we do it here from the Go Live Vegas studio. It's the Game Day Huddle on a Monday. Brett Lawson, Steve Johnson, and Jimmy Garino here. Plenty of NBA analysis in that first segment and plenty more to come down the road. But as I mentioned before we went to break, we got to jump over to the ice now because, gentlemen, and we don't like to localize this show too much, but look, Go Live Vegas, we're in Vegas. We like the Knights. We support the Knights. Therefore, we're disappointed by the Knights when it ends in a way that, well, is not exactly ideal. And them getting bounced by Edmonton, of course, Jimmy, is not ideal. But the way it happened, I think sometimes that we forget that when things go well in a short amount of time in the world of sports, it doesn't mean that your luck can run out, and it doesn't mean eventually you're going to run into a buzzsaw. Right? Everything that the Vegas Golden Knights have done, the roster is still great. All three lines are super talented. But when your stars do not put it in the net, and when you are playing a team like Edmonton, with Edmonton's speed and with Edmonton's physicality, a team who they beat 2 years ago by punching in the mouth, but then the Oilers return the favor this time around, this is what's going to happen. They ran into a better team, and I know a lot of Golden Knights fans are going to be in their fields for the next couple of days. Hell, for the entirety of the offseason, a lot of people in the in local media and local fandom are already talking about how they need to blow it up and change some things here and there. I think the nucleus is there, the foundation is there. Sometimes it just comes down to player performance, and the best players on the Vegas Golden Knights did not perform.
Yeah, absolutely. When you have your top three lines not score one goal, and in a whole series, we're not talking one game. We're talking a whole series. Yeah. And they played 5 games. They weren't the better team. Edmonton was the better team out there. However, there was 3 close games that could have went either way. We had 2 overtime games and 1 game that we should have had a penalty late in the game that really affected the outcome of that game. So in game 2. So we're looking at this as Was it a terrible season? No. They played really well. They're number one team basically throughout. Started from the front, ended on the front. They just didn't get it done.
They were there
Jack Eichel, Mark Stone, they all need to check themselves this offseason, see what they can do to make themselves better, and get it done.
Because we talk about Eichel on both sides, offensively and defensively, he's as good as he's ever been, at least this season, but he was non-existent. Hurdle was beyond non-existent. It looked like Hurdle was just out there, like he could have been figure skating at that point. I hate to pour it on, but it's the truth.
Absolutely.
That
He
hurt
was
them
lost.
immensely. Barbashev, the lack of him, hurt them immensely.
Yeah, he had 40-something goals and
Right.
had none in the playoffs.
And then you have Stone, who was red hot the first 2 games, and then obviously the injury, but then completely non-existent outside of that. So it just goes to show big-time players make big-time plays in big-time games. They won, Steve, 2 years ago and hoisted the cup because of that very reason. And now it's the lack of just that is why they're going to be sitting on their couches. And that's how sports works.
Yeah, it is. And with this team, I'll tell you what it is. It's purely emotions. This is not a very good keep in check emotional team. When something doesn't go their
They're
way,
hotheads.
right?
Yeah.
When it doesn't go their way, they wear it on their sleeve and it shows on the ice.
Remember
We
against the
have seen
Sharks
this-
a few years ago?
We have seen this throughout. Like, this has just been the makeup of the franchise to this point. That very, very, very worked up whenever there's things that just don't go their way.
Yeah.
And, you know, we seen that and we talked about it. And what did we say? We said they have to score first.
Yes.
Right? And then that puck dropped. And you might as well went to the second period because they were disinterested in the first period. Like, it just didn't seem. There was no synergy.
Urgency,
They weren't.
no urgency.
There was no sense of urgency. There was none of that. And that, I think, is the difference of, like, how these guys are going to do. And I think that the Mark Stone injury is probably bigger in the clubhouse than we realize, right, in the locker room. Because those guys a lot of times would, like, lean on Stone to be able to be the guy to kind of, like, rile the troops back up and bring some type of energy. Because, look, it's the same thing. If it's a positive swing for that team, they can score goals in, back-to-back 30 seconds. Like, so when you see this happening and you see these going with this team, they are going to have to find some way, and it's probably going to be free agency at this point, where they're going to have to do something to really, like, ramp up the franchise again.
Right.
They're going to have to bring in a guy that lights people up. They're going to have to bring in a guy that causes those disruptions, because that's kind of how it's been. We thought Theodore was going to do that, but he really hasn't been that guy that, like, goes out and really, like, instigates.
Yeah.
He just is one of the best at his position in the league, but it's not one of those things that they have a guy that goes out there when he hits the ice, right? We used to think of Reeves this way.
Yes,
When
the
Reeves would hit the
enforcer.
ice,
Yeah.
right? Then all of a sudden the crowd would get worked up. The team kind of seemed like it got an extra little pep in its step, whatever it is. That guy is not on this team. And Edmonton out-physicaled them.
That's the difference.
And that was a major thing that had
That's
not
the difference.
happened.
No, and I love that you say that. The Golden Knights, they thrive when they are the hammer. When they are the nail, they go into a shell. And that's what makes it so interesting. We saw them punch Florida in the mouth to win it. We saw them punch Edmonton in the mouth to get there a couple of years ago. I'm not saying they laid down or were bullied or pushed around. I don't think it was like that type of instance or happening, but more so that they just weren't the aggressor. So I'm not saying they necessarily got pushed around or bullied, but they weren't the ones, Jimmy, doing the bullying. And when they're the ones doing the bullying, it's a different team. And that's why I liked that Steve brought that up, because we saw it's peaks and valleys with this team right off the bat. Right, they play against Washington their inaugural season in the Cup Finals. Then the next couple of years, they have trouble getting out of with San Antonio. They have trouble getting out of their own bracket. They recalibrate. They had a lot of depth. They had the physical element. We saw what happened in 2023. Last year, they fall back down to earth. And this year, it looked like they had all the makings to go on a run again, but they weren't popping people in the mouth.
And I think the biggest issue is they don't have that spark plug player like Marcia Schultz or Pacioretty or Nate Schmidt. When those guys were on the team, they added a little bit of, like,
Chandler
F
Stevenson.
They came in there and they would say, F you. This is our house. This is where we're going to play.
Yeah.
We're going to play our game. And everybody rallied around them. Is Mark Stone a leader? Yes. But he leads more with his play. You don't see him rah-rah, hee-haw, doing it down the bench, getting his guys going. Eichel's not that guy. Eichel's going to be the guy that shuts up and just plays the best on the ice. They don't have that guy that's going to lead the team right now.
The bulldog.
Yes.
That rabid bulldog.
We thought it was going to be Barbashev because he came in, but he's not the guy. So we got to go out and we have to find somebody that's going to lead this team.
And it's a great point because we saw Edmonton. They couldn't skate with them. They didn't have the speed. They didn't have the type of play necessary to do that. But the one thing that they could have done was add the physical element to slow Edmonton down. But it was Edmonton, as you just said, Steve. They were the ones who were the aggressors. They were the ones that took the fight to the Knights. And now we have to see where they go from here. We talk about Denver and Golden State and some of these teams out of the association in basketball having to go back to the drawing board despite being very prominent in recent years. Looks like it's going to be the same case for the Golden Knights. But with this media market, with this fan base, that, for us, being Las Vegas locals, makes for a very interesting offseason in terms of headlines, talking points, and really just speculation as they try to get back to their old ways. But obviously, we can't call it there in terms of talking the Stanley Cup playoffs because even though our hearts may be broken, there's still so much for our minds to focus on. And listen, hockey existed before it came to Vegas. We've always loved the Stanley Cup Finals. We're going to watch either way, and we're going to be interested. And honestly, at this point, the team that booted the Knights may be the most dangerous team in it when it's all said and done. But we see Florida last night, Jimmy. They bounced Toronto, right? Defending champs. They're going to
be Toronto too. Couldn't be any better.
They're going to be a
Chuck in Toronto.
They're going to be a threat. But I have to ask you guys both now that it seems like, I'm not going to say it's a complete open season on hoisting the cup. Obviously, there's going to be favorites. There's going to be the more likely teams. But who is that most likely team in your eyes right now, Jimmy?
I think Edmonton's the best team.
Yeah, I do too.
They're the best team that's left in it.
Yep.
The only way they lose is goaltending.
Yep.
They have Skinner in the net right now. He got bounced after the first 2 games of the playoffs because he gave up 6 goals each game. If he can hold strong for them, they win the cup.
And even the game that the Knights won, Game 3, 0.4 seconds.
Yeah.
Like, even then, Edmonton, for pretty much the entirety of the playoffs that we've seen them so far, they've kept their foot or, their skates on the throat. Hockey's probably the one sport where that's not good to use that as a metaphor. Any other sport, it works. But, Steve, I have to ask you, are you in the same camp? Because I think just watching Edmonton, you don't even have to be a hockey expert. You just watch them play, and you're all like, that team is formidable. But then you look at Florida, who just is just in an absolute dogfight. They're just full-blown rabid pit bulls out there who seem to could tear apart any team with their teeth. How do you see this playing out? And can Carolina match the physicality and the intensity that the Panthers bring to the table?
Well, I'll tell you this. I don't think that that's a close series.
I don't either.
I think Florida just
beat them up.
I think it's maybe a 5-game series. Mm-hmm. Florida walks away with it and has time off, whereas I think the Western Conference is probably going to be like a 6-7 game series.
That'll be the fun one.
The Stars, I don't think they score enough to be able to keep up here. I just don't. I know that they're a higher seed, but I don't think that at the end of the day that they're going to be able to score enough. Especially in this series,
and especially since we still haven't really seen the dynamic duo take off. We've seen semblances of it, but McDavid and Draisaitl haven't really had that game where it's just like, okay, that's the best duo on the planet.
And the thing I gotta say is McDavid, when you turn the lights on him and you make him the focus, and he's being talked about, and he's the guy,
right?
He rises to that occasion.
Right.
He's always been the guy that shows up when the lights are the brightest. He's just been that, right? His problem is his team and him have not been able to work well enough together on a regular basis to get there.
Yes.
But now the lights are on. So I expect that you're going to see McDavid really, really show people like who he is and what he can do. You're probably going to see another gear for him, which I don't think is good for the Stars.
Right.
Look, Stars have arguably maybe the best goaltender.
He's a stud.
Like you could argue he's the best goaltender
and the worst
in the
player
league.
in the league. Jamie Benn, you're a douchebag. If I ever see you, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
I cannot stand that guy. He is just a pestering guy.
Yeah.
That when I see him, I want somebody to punch Jamie Benn in the face.
Please.
Especially after the stuff he did with the Knights and stuff going back 2 years.
Jimmy placing a bounty on Jamie.
Yeah,
his face is punchable.
Yeah.
And then you just watch what he did in the last series. He's just a cocky guy.
Yeah.
But that's what's fun because hockey has that football element or even that combat sports element where it's a sport where you could see someone get lit up.
Well, remember,
Evander Kane, enjoy it.
Evander Kane's in this series.
Yes.
So just
and we
keep
haven't
in
seen
mind,
him fight.
No,
at
and
all.
so I wouldn't be surprised if game 1, those two
match up a little bit.
Just throw it up immediately.
Throw hands.
Probably both coaches are looking at those two guys and they're like, all right, go get
All
him.
right, you know, at this point,
Let's start it off.
At this point, you're like caged lions. Let them go at it. And I love it because the one person who Evander Kane almost did fight, interesting enough, was Aiden Hill, the goaltender, right?
The goalie.
Right, and we saw that interesting
The thing that,
collision.
real quick before we jump off,
Yeah,
then,
no,
the
go ahead.
one thing that really, once Edmonton gets it going, is their power play.
Yes.
They're right now, their power play on the road is 0 for like 19 or 20 right
and
now.
they just swarm
And
you.
so they're 0 for 19 on the road. If they get that going, look out. They're going to blow people out.
And like, because we see how aggressive they can be without them putting it
They're
between.
so skilled.
Right, without them putting it between the pipes. Once they actually start splitting the post, even with a great goaltender like Dallas has, it's going to be very tough. But we're talking about Draisaitl. We're talking about McDavid. Obviously, Tkachuk. We're going to talk about some other stars. But kind of like what you guys mentioned regarding the Halbertons and the Brunsons, the young stars who are kind of having their prominent moment to step into the forefront, and their card markets reflecting that. Are we going to see something similar in the NHL, Steve? Are we going to see – because, I mean, McDavid is obviously the star. He's a household name. But can he get – unless he wins it, can he really get any bigger at this point?
This is the superstars, like, establishing their legacy.
Right.
Right? And if anything, if you see any of the teams that I think that are going to really start to, like, drive that collector market – it's probably if Florida gets back to the finals again.
Yeah.
Then all of a
Tkachuk and
sudden,
them guys,
you're going to have Tkachuk and some of those guys are now going to start being guys that were being picked up because Florida hockey teams have not been collected.
Right.
Like players aren't collected by collectors, right? And I think that's really, really going to change. And look, they're going to Captain America him, right?
Yeah.
So Tkachuk is going to get all this run. Everybody's going to be talking about, you know, like what can be done and everything there because of all this buildup, all of the stuff that we've had that's led up to
the narrative.
This, right?
Yeah.
The whole Canada thing and all of that stuff, right? So, and Jimmy, you know, going off about, you know, it happening in Toronto, right? Like all of those things being there, that's the type of news that you need for a player, but he's established, right?
He's made his bones.
I don't think this is a playoff series that you're going to hear a new name that's just going to wow you for the first time. There were players in this playoffs that could have done that. They are no longer in this playoffs.
I got you.
Right?
Yep.
So, if anything, I would say him. And then the other guy is, I think this is a chance for Draisaitl to show everybody how good he is.
That he's not
so
just a Scottie Pippen.
He's probably the other guy that could have a little bit of a bump and see a little bit of a value, especially if he goes out and he's, say, the best player in this series, right? Then you could see that effect a little bit. But I don't see much of it outside of the Florida guys. I don't see much. Dallas doesn't have anything that really excites the NHL fandom,
right,
you know, as a player, right? And I'll challenge you right now. Name 2 Carolina Hurricanes. I'll wait.
I'm not going to. I can't.
I'll wait.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody's going to be able to do that.
Commercial, baby.
Right.
And it's a great point because much like what we talk about, guys, with the NBA, kind of feels like a changing of the guard. We see the game kind of rewriting itself in terms of the ways you compete, the ways you floor a team that's competitive and can actually have a chance to contend for a title. A little bit of a different approach, and because of that, these young stars are stepping in to the forefront, into the spotlight. Hockey, it's very much the guard that has already been there. It's just a matter of, can this team or this team get it done? They've been in the mix in years past. We know Edmonton's been in the mix. Well, obviously, we know Florida's been in the mix. The question is, whose time will it be this time around? What established star, what household name, at least if you are a hockey fan, who will really have their moment in the sun? And that's a great point that Steve brings up because hockey's a niche sport anyway. Only so many guys are going to sell as opposed to basketball or football. So it's fitting that it's all going to come back to the big star players. Real quick before we go to break, though, Aaron says in the comments that he does not think Edmonton is going to hoist the cup when it's all said and done. Aaron, go ahead and just give us, even if you don't hop on mic, who do you think is going to win it? Who do you think is going to win it? You can't say they're not going to win it and then not have a take on who's going to. Okay, there you go. So he gave us a take.
He likes American.
He likes
as
an
well.
He
likes
does.
an American team because apparently the American teams are.
Or he likes the team that bounced his team.
Right, exactly.
Right, which is, and look, that's a fair weather thing. I totally get it. I understand that, right?
Well, that's why if Edmonton wins, it'll make it a little bit more palatable.
We lost to the champions.
We
That's what we always want.
Doesn't it feel like the bandwagon whenever it rolls into someone's town, it always leaves with more people?
Right.
Like, so I totally understand
Jump
it.
on the
So,
bus.
I used to do it when I wrestled when I was younger, though. If I lost a match and that kid had went on to
Oh,
win it,
100%.
that would be what I
100%.
first would lead
Yeah.
with. Be
You're
like,
hoping
how'd
he
you do
would
this
stay.
weekend?
Yes.
Yeah,
I lost to the
I did
champion.
okay. I took third, but the guy that beat me, he won it.
100%.
You always
Yeah.
led with that.
If you're in the regional or state tournament, you're following the guy who beat you, whether regardless if it was a close match or whatever, a tight match.
yeah.
You're all like, whatever he does, I'm going to kind of be attached to him in a way. So that's definitely that's just how sports works, and that's part of the fun. No doubt about it. But apparently, I don't know, the commissioner of the NHL, we haven't seen a Canadian team hoist the cup when it's all said and done. Maybe there's a conspiracy there. Maybe there isn't. But those are the takes you get from the one and only Aaron Ellikis, the brains of the operation here at Go Live Vegas. And if you want to be involved in anything regarding Go Live Vegas, obviously you could have your own podcast, your own show, just like we do here in the studio. So reach out. Make sure you contact them. We're expanding on social media. We're expanding in numerous different ways. And, of course, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, all of our social media channels as well. It's an exciting time to be in the mix. And if you're in the mix, you get more hockey takes like that from the man involved or in charge of the whole operation. So, obviously, fun stuff talking hockey. We'll continue to keep our thumb on this as we get deeper and deeper. We have the East set. We have the West set, just like we do in basketball. But really quick, before we wrap things up, we're going to take one more break. And when we come back, we're going to focus on the offseason because as eventful as NBA playoffs and Stanley Cup playoffs are, you can make the case the NFL offseason is every bit as eventful. Schedules have been released. Brock Purdy has been paid. And we also got some stuff to talk about in the world of Major League Baseball as well to put a bow on it. So don't go anywhere. We'll do just that. It's the Game Day Huddle live on a Monday from the Go Live Vegas studio.
Peppermint Patty's the worst. Comicon.com, your daily comic convention online. Insightful reviews, previews of the comics, toys, and games you need to know. Delightful chats with luminaries from around the geek spectrum. In print, on video, and everywhere in between. The show never stops on Comicon.com.
Come on down to the girl bar. Craft beer's never too far. Like do every night. Do a crew and get it right. Raise the glass, raise the you hat. The booze, friends are near. Dance around, let them play. Voodoo ball's a place to stay.
Stop the dance, feel the thrill, chase the legends with dreams fulfill. In the game, where the story goes, it's all here again in the sports. Yeah, unleash wind, fuel the fire, let the play begin. And this ignite your flame, every clock, every dream, every game.
Go Live Vegas Studios, a unique multi-camera social media virtual content creators paradise. We offer high-end services using live streaming and film production for your personal or corporate, commercial or event and campaign needs. Pre-record or live stream to your audience on multiple social media platforms simultaneously. Fun and interactive with social media comments, phone lines, live remotes, audio Foley sounds, and Snapchat filters. Be creative, get recognized, and make money. We help you by providing an all in-house production team. Visit our website at golive.vegas.
Quick turnaround on the breaks today. A little pep in the step for Aaron behind the boards as we look to wrap things up here on the Game Day Huddle from the Go Live Vegas studio. Talking about hockey before the break, and as we mentioned, right, this is the time where styles very much make fights, and Steve even kind of alluded to it again because we didn't really necessarily give our official picks of who's going to win the whole thing, but we're kind of giving our leans. We think Edmonton may be the most skilled team, but Florida's the most physical team. And Steve just brought up a great point and how he likes the Panthers simply because of much like what we saw the Knights against the Capitals a few years ago in their inaugural season when they went down hard. Sometimes a team just gets hit in the mouth and they do not know how to recover. They go into a shell. Obviously, the series hasn't happened yet, but it's likely to believe that if they get out in an early aggressive start, that Carolina won't be able to match the intensity, nor will the winner of the Dallas-Edmonton series. But looking at the Golden Knights really quick, because, again, we localize it sometimes, and when you have a team that relevant, it sometimes doesn't even feel like a local story. It's more of just a hockey story,
right?
Because the Golden Knights are that big of a commodity. But you have a bit of info regarding their next step in the offseason process.
Yeah, well, the Knights are already immediately getting with Jack Eichel's camp because he's got 1 year left on his $80 million deal that he did, and they're already working on getting a new deal done. The Knights, I believe, will be very aggressive in shoring up any of their unknowns to be able to move into the free agent class because look, they moved around slow, and I think this is a really good lead-in for the NFL here as well, that we've got them, they kind of move slow, and then they've missed some opportunities in the free agency market that weren't quite, guys that we thought they should be able to move on, and then by the time they got there, they're already gone.
It's like smoke and mirrors.
Or taking too long with their own guys to get them to look at other opportunities, right? So I think those two things are key. I really think of the Marshall Salt situation with them and how it took so long to try to work a deal with him, and by the time they did, he was already 1 foot out the door,
He
right?
was pissed about it.
Right.
And the fans, and that was a big part about that offseason, the immediate aftermath. The fans and the media, that was the talking point. You quickly forget that they were the defending reigning champs because of the way he depart.
Yeah, absolutely. And the amount of money that they saved, not signing him, not signing Pacioretty, not signing these guys that took off over the last 2 years, they better roll out the red carpet. They better give Jack Eichel everything that he wants.
Kitchen sink.
Do not hesitate. Whatever the guy wants, he's the best player on your team. He's the best player, probably second or third best player in the league. You better sign him and sign him quick.
Teams need to lock up their stars. They need to lock up their superstars. They need to get that stuff done, and that's what the Niners did, right? The Niners said, hey, this is the quarterback. This is the guy we're going to move forward with. Man, I'll tell you what, Mr. Irrelevant did a really nice job here.
And that's a great segue because you mentioned the word aggression. Well, the Niners, safe to say, wasn't unforeseen. We had a feeling it was coming. In fact, it was on the radar the entire 2024 season. But now it is official, as you mentioned it, Steve. $265 million extension for Brock Purdy through 5 years. ESPN's Adam Schefter reported that the new deal includes $181 million in overall guaranteed money, which, as you said, is a monumental jump for Mr. Irrelevant, who was the last pick.
Remember, he was in a
2022
playoff
draft.
run, and we were talking about the fact he was making like $700,000.
What is it? Let's hear it.
Yes, I was going to bring that
Wow,
up at the end.
Thanks,
Aaron.
Thank you for that. That's big.
Thanks for breaking the news, Aaron. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah. Aaron, thanks for doing the one thing.
What
that
Aaron just said
is the one thing we want you to do, but when you do it, we get mad.
The owner of the Golden Knights yesterday announced that he would be stepping down from his position, which doesn't necessarily mean he's leaving the team at this point. Just says that he's going to step down from his day-to-day oversight of the team
and these things happen,
right?
Yeah.
And
It's called I'm old, rich, billionaire.
And I don't need to do this every day.
and I
I'm
sell
getting
more
tired of
alcohol than
dealing
I
with
do
this.
than I do pucks in the net.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It comes to a point where owning a sports team is just one of the things you do. It's not all.
Well,
you
and he
do.
owns multiple sports teams.
Exactly.
That's the other thing people need to remember.
And that's what he was known for. That's why when we knew he was going to be the owner, when it was all said and done in 2016, 2017, when we knew this was going to be an actual thing, that's why people were so excited.
But, when we're talking about this Brock Purdy thing, we're talking about this whole situation. There's no way that any of us would have said they were going to give Brock Purdy the most money of any of the quarterbacks in the league.
Well, and that's
I understand how that works, right? Dak got paid, and everything. But there's nobody that we would have in our immediate circles that would put Brock Purdy in the top 10 quarterbacks in the league right now.
We could even read the exact thing in the exact thread in the group chat, right? What was it? Brock, I said on Friday when it broke, Brock Purdy making $53 million a year. Can't say that was on the bingo card back in May of 2022.
Exactly.
And like you said, because even after that first year where he led them to the conference championship, got hurt against Philadelphia, even going into 2023, you were apprehensive because you're all like, all right, was it just smoke and mirrors? They have film on him now. Can he repeat it? And he was stellar in 2023, plays in a Super Bowl. Really, if it were for different coaching, woulda, shoulda, coulda. But if it were a different coaching move than, not clock management, but situational management through Kyle Shanahan, he could call himself a Super Bowl champion by now, and he's about to make $53 million a year for, again, the last pick in the draft in 2022. If Mr. Irrelevant becomes relevant, quote unquote, and has a place in the league as a starter, that alone, Jimmy, is a huge storyline. To make to get the bag and make this type of money, it's unprecedented.
After last year, I get it. They were beat up. I get they didn't have all their weapons in there. But there's zero chance that I am riding with Brock Purdy. He did not look like the guy. Does he look serviceable? Yes. But to hand him the bag,
$53 million a year,
the bag that they just did, and now they're going to have to cut other players on that team.
Let me ask you a question.
And they already have.
Yeah.
Right, and let me ask you a question here, and this is a very, very valid question. Jimmy, I'll ask you. Geno Smith or Brock Purdy?
Geno Smith, 100%.
I go Geno Smith. Based off of what we
That
saw last
right
year.
there,
Yeah.
that right there, right, tells you all you need to know. I'm going to go on record right now. John Lynch will lose his job before the season is over.
Wow.
He has decimated that team, and that's crazy because
It's a crazy
he was
thought.
one of the best in the league prior to this.
It went
And
south
unless he found some magic formula in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round of the NFL draft this year, and he just smoke and mirrored everybody, and he just pulled off the biggest heist ever, there's no way that this team is going to even be relevant in their division, let alone the talk of the NFL.
And we just saw with the eye test, and I know you got something there, Jimmy. We just saw with the eye test, Purdy was not the same. Obviously, there were tons of injuries. The offense wasn't the same around. Obviously, not having Christian McCaffrey, the pieces around him, Ayuk, and everything related to that. It was kind of a doomed offensive season from the start. But at the same time, you see how Purdy handled it. I don't necessarily know if that's the guy you give the bag to. It's a guy you name your starter. It's a guy you commit to moving forward, and it may be even a guy you keep. But $53 million a year after what you guys want to take a guess at how much he earned over the course of his first 3 seasons, 2022, 23, and 24?
$1 million.
$6 million?
2.6.
Yeah.
that's
$2.6
crazy.
million, and now look at him. Go ahead, Jimmy.
And the thing with it's like you're competing against nobody for him.
Right.
Not one NFL team's going to come and grab him.
Right.
So what the hell are you paying him for? No one's going to pay him $53 million. No one in the
Like
league.
what? You don't have to keep him that happy.
Yeah, you don't have to pay
He's
him
not-
like, hey, give him everything.
He's not getting poached away.
No, nobody's going to get him. So why?
And it's at a time where we talked about it on the show, like I think in recent weeks even. Dak Prescott, highest paid player in league history. Jordan Love probably paid a bit too early, and we take those guys over Brock Purdy in a
100%.
flash. And that's not even a knock on Purdy. That's just being realistic and us prognosticating and evaluating quarterbacks.
And so when I was looking at when you said the Niners are still favored to win their division. So what I wanted to do with you guys, because I have a little bit of money
Are they
on my
really?
Yes.
That's wild.
At plus 155.
The
The
Shanahan receipt is something.
Rams are also plus 155.
Yeah.
Cardinals are plus 575 and the Seahawks plus 575. So what I want to do real quick, we're going to go through the 8 divisions. You guys are going to give me a winner. We're going to put it in, and whatever we win, because you guys are going to pick the right ones. I know it. You guys are very good. You're very
Just
good at
sharps.
betting. We're going to
Just
split it
sharps.
at the end of the year.
I love it.
So this Niners division,
up.
Niners, Rams, Cardinals, Seahawks. Who are we taking?
I'm taking the Rams. It's because assuming Stafford's healthy, there's been 3 drafts in a row.
I'm
now
taking the Rams as well.
Rams as
and
well.
I think defensively they're the best of
Yes.
the group now.
And you bring in additional weapons, right? You have a great defense already that you've only made better. McVay and Stafford, enough said.
NFC South, Buccaneers, Falcons, Panthers, Saints. Who we taking?
I think Tampa's still probably the safe pick, but
I like
Atlanta.
I'm
Ooh,
bullish. I'm
we're
bullish on
all-
Atlanta this
we all
year.
like
all
Atlanta.
I
everywhere.
am bullish on Atlanta.
I was Carolina. I'm only
Right.
leaning Carolina because I think they've done a big upgrade this
I think they have a
offseason.
possibility to make the playoffs. Carolina
Right.
does this
Wild
year.
card.
I don't think they win the division.
But
I
they-
think Atlanta's.
I do like
you mention
Atlanta to
Atlanta
win
and
the
Carolina?
division, so I
Wow.
think from that standpoint, I'm on
Yeah,
with the
like I
Atlanta
could
call.
see where is Tampa the favorite?
Tampa's favorite
That
at
makes sense.
plus
Yeah,
105.
because Tampa's a safe pick,
and
but
you're getting
Atlanta
plus 220 with Atlanta.
and Atlanta has value, and they could be the dark horse.
All right, we're
Screw
taking
it,
Atlanta.
let's go with the Falcons.
Chalk them in. All right, NFC North. Tough division. This one's going to
Oh,
be up
yeah.
in the air.
It's gonna be a fun one.
Lions, Packers, Vikings, Bears.
I'm still going to go with the Lions.
Lions?
Yep. I think they're talented
Steve?
enough. It's tough.
I'm going Packers.
Packers.
Yeah.
Where's Michael Lugo? Get in the
Yes,
comments.
Michael, we need you in this
Yeah.
on this. I think the Lions win this division. I do
Okay.
think
Yeah.
they come back. So we're
The
going to take
talent
the
is-
Lions on
and they're
that
going to be
one.
healthy.
Yes.
Yeah.
NFC East. So do we Eagles or Commanders?
Next.
Eagles?
I'll go Eagles. I'll go
Eagles.
Yeah.
Everybody says Eagles. They're minus 160, so we're losing value there. But
Yep.
AFC West, another tough. Chiefs, Chargers, Broncos, Raiders are out. Broncos probably a year or two too
Yeah.
late. I do think the Chargers have a chance to
The
win this.
Chargers have the team. It's just when you have a quarterback
So-
like Herbert who's going to be so hot and cold based off the regular season and the postseason, they're hard to bet on. On paper, I think the Chargers are the best
Well,
team.
and a good discussion right now is, though, what are they going to get if they do trade to Gus Edwards? Because
Right.
this week, all the talk is that Gus Edwards, unfortunately, is going to get moved.
And given who they
And
brought in a running
they're
back.
going to get
Omarion
something
Hampton?
back for him.
Yep.
So what is that? Is it another corner? Is it a defensive back
Value
to help
player.
out? What is that going to be? I don't have the Chiefs here. Jimmy, I'm opposite of you. I've been standing here saying it.
You love the Broncos.
Broncos
I
are going to
know.
win the division
he
this
has
year,
been,
and
yeah.
I hate to say it, but I just feel like they're going
So
to.
we got Chargers or Broncos. Chargers are plus 325.
And I want the
Broncos
Chargers
are
to win.
390.
Yeah, that's a head versus heart type of thing.
Yeah.
Where if you lose the bet, you're happy, but if the Chargers don't make it, then you profit.
Yeah.
So where are we going?
I'm leaning Chargers because
Chargers?
I like the sum of the roster.
All right, we'll take
parts.
Chargers at plus 325. That's
No,
that's
value,
strong.
baby.
big
That's
value.
juicy.
Yes,
That's juicy.
AFC South: Texans, Jaguars, Colts, Titans. They're all plus money because this one's up
That's
in the
rough.
air. Up in the air. Jaguars loaded up this
They
offseason
did.
with wide receiver help. Are they going to bounce back? Are the Colts going to be better now that?
I
No?
don't think so.
You don't think so?
Yeah.
Are we all riding Houston again?
I'm just going to go Texas because of the quarterback.
You could trust
And
him.
they have arguably the best.
And you're getting plus money still with
I mean,
the Texans.
who's going to be better than Will Anderson right now?
Yeah, exactly. And I think they have the best
Right?
coach. D'Amico Ryans is probably the best
So-
coach in that bunch.
You know, when I look at that, and I'm talking like Anderson might be the
Defensive
top
player-
defensive
defensive
player of
player
the year.
Yeah.
Right? So
Don't forget Stingley, one of
Right.
the three best corners in the game.
Right. So from that standpoint, now they've
Danielle
played
Hunter.
together enough. I thought they drafted well. I think their offseason went really well. I actually like the Texans. I actually think Texans run away with this
I
division.
think, and I actually think the Texans may be the best version that we've seen since drafting Anderson and
Exactly.
Stroud. You've had receiver injuries, but you would shore up the offensive
But
line.
Stroud had an extra year to
Exactly.
get. He's in
But
his
you're going to
prime,
get a
that third
full,
year.
healthy season of John Mechie. We don't even talk
We don't
about
even know
him.
and we don't even know what he keep
Right.
offering. We know the skill set. We know what he brings to the table, and I feel like we may see the best version of Stroud that we've seen so far.
All right, we're going into the AFC North.
Yes.
Another tough division. It could be up in the air with the Ravens, Bengals, Steelers, and Browns.
Just because I still don't like the Bengals defense, I'm going to go with Baltimore, more well-rounded team. But
Minus
I think
135 on the Baltimore.
Yeah.
They're a little favorite.
Yeah,
in
and they got the chalk there, but I feel confident in the chalk. I think Cincinnati does make the playoffs this year, and I think the big three lights it up once more. But at the defense is and now that what you have Trey Hendrickson, who's
We don't know what's gonna
not
happen.
at all.
And that's
He's
what
making-
I was going to
he's making
say.
statements about
Yeah.
at this point, like he doesn't want anything to do with the Bengals. I mean,
And
at
that's
this
where
point,
I
not
was going to
looking
go
good.
is that if Hendrickson doesn't get a deal done before the end of camp,
Yeah.
that team's done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is not that.
They're
It's
going
going
to put up a shitload of points, but
it's
they're
going
going to lose a lot
blow
of
up
games.
their it's going to blow their locker room up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? He's one of the most liked guys in the locker room.
Of course.
He's
He
a-
is their guy.
And he
Glue
is,
guy.
I'll be honest, he is Max Crosby to that team.
No doubt.
Right? And so for them
No doubt.
to for lack of a better phrase, dick around with him
Mm-hmm.
at this point, I think it's ridiculous. And then two, this is just going to take it back to the Brock Purdy thing, and I wanted to point this out. They so grossly overpaid those three skill positions
Oh, yeah.
that they're not going to be able to rebound from that anytime soon.
They put themselves
so
in the jam.
They're in the best spot they could be in right now if they have Hendrickson on the field.
Yeah.
If he decides to just sit and make a move him, they're
And
in
it's-
trouble.
And it's like, because this was, I think you were in Nashville, Jimmy, for that episode, but Steve and I discussed it. It's all fine and dandy if you took the right approach, you could have tagged Henderson, had him, and then still re-signed T. Higgins or extended T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. You have your big three, your passing trio, and at least you keep your stud defensive end for another year. That was just an absolute
I think they did it.
crucial
Yeah.
mistake.
They was signing T. Higgins over Hendrickson. I
Yeah.
think they fumbled the bag there. They have no money left,
Yeah.
and they're trying to scour, like, say, where can we get this money to get this guy done? And they don't have it.
And it's-
have no chance to get it done.
It's like they're cash broke essentially,
Yes.
and it's fitting because the Bengals are a team that are have been known frequently throughout the years to have talent, but just have an absolutely horrible direction of management in the front office. I think that will continue to be the case, even if they're productive and even if they make the playoffs.
Yep.
LOL, Edmonton won't win from Raquel Kearney Elkis. So there you go. So the Elkis clan are not big on the Oilers. Just a quick update there going back to hockey. But really quick, Jimmy, so I like Baltimore. Who do you guys like?
I think Baltimore wins.
Yeah.
I have Baltimore here, and I think that, look, I think that it is. Are the Browns going to be disruptive? I don't know. I mean, we're looking at what Camp is talking about, and
It's going to be
all they're
fun.
talking about is shooter standards.
Yeah, it's going to be
That's
fun
crazy.
and entertaining, but it may not
Right?
they may not be very good.
But I don't
Yeah.
know that they'll be
Relevant.
very, very good.
Yeah.
But again, we'll see.
And Pittsburgh, I mean, I have it marked on my notes. This is going to be the last thing I ask. WTF is Rodgers doing? Talking about the schedule, Rich Eisen, I think, was the host who brought it up this week. It was a very good point. You don't put Pittsburgh week 1 in a primetime slate if you think someone other than Aaron Rodgers is going to be the quarterback,
100%.
right? Isn't that kind of
They
a little
know
bit of
what's going on.
a writing on the
But my
wall
question
indicator?
to you is, if Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback of that team, Is he better than the Ravens?
No.
not even close.
Right.
No.
So
And now that they lost
the
Pickens,
relevancy-
yeah,
I don't even
they-
think he's better than Cincinnati.
the relevancy of that move at this point
Not at all.
is null and point. I don't think that, and I hate to say it, I don't think they make playoffs this year.
I'm
No,
with you.
they're
I'm
right.
with you.
They're
I
100%
think-
out.
I think that he will do less. Now, granted, if he's healthy, that's a little bit different. But on paper, judging it solely off of that, I think Aaron Rodgers will likely do less with Pittsburgh right now than he could have potentially done with the Jets heading into the 2023 season.
Because that Jets had a decent roster.
Really good roster.
You look at
Yeah.
Pittsburgh's offense right now.
And
Who scares you?
And they lost their best weapon.
Yeah,
Right.
not one person on that offense is.
I mean, DK Metcalf.
Fryer.
but-
Well, yeah.
He, in his 7th year,
Exact-
he's really like scaring
and
you.
Metcalf with Rodgers may not click. Freiermuth is the one thing that you could really kind of
the consistent.
Exactly, but he's a tight end.
I'm not afraid of
outside-
either of those guys. If
Right.
I'm a D coordinator, I'm locking him down one
Well,
on
and they
one.
How
gave
many- how many
every
ti-
D
how many-
quarterback. They were game planning for Najee, and Najee's
Right.
now in San Diego.
And how many tight ends are really going to, outside of Brock Bowers and a few others, they may be productive, they may get you points in the fantasy team. How many tight ends are
They're
really
not their number 1
who are breaking your back? Exactly.
All right, getting into our last division.
Buffalo.
Is it even?
No.
Do we even have to talk about
In
it?
fact, I'm glad you say that because did you know that Buffalo is favorited in all 17 games on their schedule?
Yes.
They are the favorite in every
Yes.
game right now. I feel like just because this is the way this works, because that's so heavy Stroud, you could go and put small bets on every game on the other side.
Yeah.
Right? And you only have to win one or two. And I don't think they will off 15 wins because they may win that division by like week 12.
And then they can rest their guys.
Yeah,
I'm
so
with you.
I'm less concerned about that.
All right, so our bet is going in right now. $150 wager that I'm putting in for the 4 of us. Aaron's included. He's in on this.
Let's see.
We
I
have
love
the-
it. Jimmy's
But
actually.
wait.
he's not kidding.
We
His
have
thumb-
it.
his
But the
thumbs
question
are
is,
moving.
but Jimmy,
His
the
thumbs are
question
going.
is, if Aaron's in on it, is his take in Canadian dollars?
We'll
Right?
we'll decide that at the end of the year once we pay him
Conversion rate.
Yeah,
We're going to charge
currency.
him as conversion rate. Everyone else will
love
get
it.
something different.
out. So
Then he'll-
$150 brings us back $103,000, $25,000 a piece by just picking the winners. We
Punch
have
it in,
the
baby.
Rams, Falcons, Lions, Eagles, Chargers, Texans, Ravens, and Bills. If I don't, right there,
Chalky.
it is.
Chalky.
We are
love
in the mix. Let's go. We'll take $100,000 at the end of February.
And
next
now-
year.
well, Aaron will get 17.5.
Yeah,
okay?
the conversion rate, baby. But no, and now that the schedules are set, you're going to see season win totals. You're going to see all kinds of interest in fantasy and, of course, in the card market hobby or in the card collecting hobby. Really quick before we pivot to baseball to wrap things up, guys, though, I'll ask you 2 questions. What do you think about the schedule reveal? It doesn't have to be true in depth, but what do you think, Steve, stands out the most about the schedule reveal? Is it a team with a particularly hard schedule, an easy schedule, a team that, has a lot of primetime games like Dallas? Dallas has nearly every game of theirs is a standalone game. Yeah. And at this point in 2025, how many people really want to watch the Cowboys? What stood out to you about the actual schedule reveal?
That the Bengals only have to fly 7,400 miles, and the Chargers have to fly 28,000
across the country.
miles.
But you get to live in the greatest city in the world. So what do you can't complain if you're in San Diego.
I get it, but well, they're not in San Diego, unfortunately.
Oh, they're
I
not.
did say it.
Shoot, I've totally forgot. I just brain farted there. I'm like,
That's all
they're
good.
not.
It's because I said San Diego
Jimmy
because
said
I
the-
always do that.
When
I
Jimmy
always,
said the greatest city in the world, I'm like, is a guy
That's
who's
not
a,
LA.
Is a,
I'm
New
like-
York- is a guy who's a New Yorker at heart saying
Yeah.
LA still
I screwed that.
that
all
was
up.
entertaining.
I was thinking they were
That's
still
good.
in San Diego, but
when
never
Jimmy
mind.
was right, when Jimmy was wrong. But no,
Definitely wrong.
I'll tell you what stood out.
Yeah.
The NFL has done something that Major League Baseball is dying to figure out, and they're letting it be fun again, right? Now, Major League Baseball is trying to let it be fun again this year. They're letting guys celebrate home runs a little bit. They're not getting so chippy with it. I'll tell you, though, the schedule reveals that were done by the teams. That, after the draft, usually we have no discussion of anything.
until minicamp.
Was
Yeah.
literally 3 days of the biggest discussion. And I will tell you, one team did a massive, massive great job for their brand, and that was the Raiders. The Raiders absolutely have killed it
Social media
with
and
how
everything.
they're riding with their number 1 draft pick,
Yep.
that they're making him a face that everyone's going to know and see.
Right off the bat.
And then the way that they went against their social media and how they did their announcement on it. And look, I'll tell you what, being in the division, of course, I'm not thrilled to see them talk crap about the Chargers twice in that video. But damn it, It was funny. It was entertaining, and it wasn't wrong.
And you know what I love, too? Because the Chargers in recent years, you probably know this, other people watching and listening right now may not be as familiar. The Chargers are known for this on social media. They make like these anime-style videos to hype up the season. The Chargers' social media team is legit. So it's kind of cool to see not only other teams, but their rival teams in their basically backyard to kind of pick up on that.
And I do
trend
think
as
the
well.
Bills did a great job on theirs, too.
Yeah.
And if you didn't see the Bills one, it was pretty funny. But the general manager calls Josh Allen. Josh Allen's shooting hoops.
Yeah.
And he goes, what should we do on this reveal? And Josh Allen's like, just use AI.
Yeah.
Just use AI. And he
That's
goes,
where we
okay.
are now.
So he starts looking it up, and he's like, let's use AI. And then all of a sudden, he calls up Allen Iverson. He's like, will you be – and then he goes, at the very end, and I love this, he goes, so can I get a Go Bills? And he goes, go Josh Allen.
Yeah.
I love it.
The most AI
was
thing
so
ever.
good, and
Yeah.
I'm telling you, that was great. But no, it created hype for the schedule,
that's what you want.
and it brought that excitement in. Where I think the NFL is really gonna like falter is if you do have a team that say like the Panthers or one of those teams that kind of takes off. They really didn't do a good job of like accounting for them
Like
in
a
this
dark
offseason,
horse type of
right?
team. Right,
and
right.
so
A
you don't
sleeper.
have it, and it's not on the schedules too. And so what'll happen is then you're going to have these problems where like let's just argue that Carolina is right.
Jesus.
They're 10-2,
Yeah.
and they're coming into a Sunday game into a flex weekend, right? And the NFL is going to flex them over, say, I don't know, the Chiefs, right? They haven't done enough to build that up to be able to pull it off. So what they'll do is they'll be too skittish and they won't pull the trigger to do it.
And
I'm just throwing that out.
I get what you're saying.
You know, or if Atlanta's another team.
You
that,
have
like,
to be proactive in your marketing, 100%. And
Yeah.
just piggybacking off of that, Jimmy, because I want to ask you that this final question as we wrap things up, in that the momentum on the card markets. We talked about how the draft can try to change things, whether it be the incoming rookie players or just players surrounding them on the teams these rookies are being drafted to, because you now know their performance is likely to increase because the pieces around them. With the schedule release, knowing who some of these guys, really all of these guys, are going to be playing, particularly with the quarterback matchups and stuff of this nature, the star players of one team versus the star player of the other team, even if they're not directly matched up on the same side of the ball. How does that work for someone in your position? Because I know on the day after the draft, you really kind of have to go through everything with a magnifying glass. Is it similar with the schedule release?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
Because in football, you always know if you're buying the cards now in the off season, you're gonna get it for about 15 to 20% less than what you're gonna pay during the season for that player. So if you're going out and buying your CJ Stroud rookies, well, guess what? If he goes 3-0 the first 3 games, he's going to get an instant 15 to 20% increase right away.
Wow.
Where in the stock market can you find that on a guarantee? You can't. But in the NFL, if you're good at prospecting, you can find it every single year. Buy now in the offseason, wait 3 to 4 games, watch him throw 3 touchdown passes. Guess what? J.J. McCarthy, buy him now, wait.
Wow.
The Minnesota Vikings come out to 4-0, and he's thrown 3 touchdown passes in every game and thrown for 350 yards. Guess what his card market's going to do? 40 to 50% jump. That's what people are doing right now.
So even someone like a Jackson Dart, who you don't know even when he's going to play, but you know if you could get him now, and if he does play by early to mid-November, you're going to be happy.
It's
you did
just
what you
getting
needed
that
to do
product
now.
that has him in an NFL uniform, right?
Correct.
Like
Right.
that's what happens with that.
Right.
So when you start talking, when you come into the card collecting market, we want to talk about those rookie quarterbacks. No, it's sophomore quarterbacks. Sophomore quarterbacks for the first 6 weeks of the season, and then the product starts to come out with the new players, and then it becomes all about the rookies, right? But right now, your guys that you should be buying, in my opinion, you need to be buying quarterbacks, obviously.
Jaden Daniels,
right?
Bo Nix, guys like that.
I think there's Bo Nix is probably still a very good buy right now. I still don't think that his market has really done what it's supposed to. I think you probably got to look in Atlanta, right?
So do you expect
We should see Penix.
So
Penix is one of those ones that if that team gets hot and rolls, he continues to play well as he ended the few games he played at the end of the season.
A lot of the Caleb Williams, even a lot of the 2024 quarterbacks,
Caleb Williams,
are really going to be on the radar. Even maybe a Drake May. I know the
Drake May is a very good buy right now, and do not be surprised. That team is better, significantly better than what they were last year.
With the coach they brought in, I think there's no doubts they will.
They as far as that goes, those guys. I have an odd one for you, and I want Jimmy to really take this in.
Yeah.
Tyreek Hill, non-quarterback, because The rumor is Tyreek Hill is going to Dallas.
Yeah.
And if he goes to
He
Dallas,
wants out.
that is the most visual place to be for a non-quarterback position player in the NFL. If you want to make sales and you want to create hype and you want to get a guy
that's where you go.
know, I'm telling you, I think that would case. And then if Aaron Rodgers does sign, in fact, with the Steelers,
that's a public
you
team,
will
too.
see a bump to Aaron Rodgers card prices just because of the fan base by itself.
public
So
team.
we brought up Caleb Williams about buying him right now. I just checked his first 3 games. Not a good look for Caleb Williams. The Bills, the Chiefs, the Vikings.
Rough.
Yep.
That first 3 games for him is going to
that's
be
a gauntlet.
Ooh,
That's a
He might be
gauntlet.
0-3, so
Right.
he might not be a good buy right now.
But
definitely check the first 3 games if you're buying quarterbacks.
But I love how you bring that up. That's a great tidbit of information, and those are the type of insights that we get on the show. You get the day-to-day, the weekly sports talk that we've really been elaborating upon here the last hour and a half or so. But this, like what Jimmy and Steve just gave you, those bits of analysis, those insights, them shining light on stuff that you may have not previously known that much about, that's what this program is all about. And really quick, as we wrap things up, guys, we have to touch on baseball. Steve, I know you have some tidbits, but really quick, we got to focus on the fandom here, Jimmy, because you know on every show, at least for about 30 seconds to a minute, we like to make it New York Sports Talk Radio.
Of course.
Our Yankees get it done in the Bronx in the Subway Series. Juan Soto caught the boo bug hard, and boy, should he get used to it, because that's not going anywhere the rest of his career, at least when in proximity to how it relates to the Yankees. We saw Max Fried and Cody Bellinger and Paul Goldschmidt, the offseason acquisition, shine yesterday to win the series. They're going to play again in July when they go to Queens, right? But this is the type of matchup that's just, it's so good for baseball. I know a lot of people like to kind of grimace at it and think that, you know, oh, it's New York. If you're not a New York fan, how great is it really? But going back to the Giants and the Yankees back in the 40s and the 50s, people like the Subway Series. It's entertaining. It's good for television ratings. They're going to play again. But looking at the stars in that game, you have Aaron Judge, the most productive player in baseball right now. You have Juan Soto, who obviously is the $700 million man. And then all at the same time, you have Ohtani, who's revolutionizing the game. I want to talk about, because we've talked about the other stars, the Bobby Witts, the Jackson Merrills, and all these guys, even Rafael Devers. But it seems like heading into 2025, and Steve, we kind of mentioned it when we were doing the show down at the Diecast, the Super Convention. Now, there seems to be a true big 3 type of feel in the card market heading into 2025. Has that been the case with Ohtani, Judge, and Soto as far as the sales?
Yeah, absolutely. And Judge just continues to,
He has to,
rise
right?
and
Yeah.
rise. And the guy's batting still above 400, and we're going into June.
His numbers,
his numbers are
so
incredible.
much better
His
than
last
everybody
162
else's.
games,
It's
if you
insane.
went backwards from here to there, he's hitting over 400 during that
It's
time
insane.
period.
And the thing is, we haven't seen somebody like a Barry Bonds type
Right.
hitter come through the baseball, and since he left,
He's the closest thing.
Yeah.
He is the closest guy to where if he comes up with bases loaded, you might do the Barry Bonds and walk him, because you know if you don't walk him, he's putting up a run, or he might even put up 4
No
runs.
doubt.
So with Judge and the way he's swinging the bat, if he stays healthy, we could see astronomical numbers come out of him, and I don't think anybody's even close.
Because
right
a few years ago, it was in 2022, it was about, all right, could he break Roger Maris's record? That's more of a Yankee, I mean, it pertains to the whole league, or the whole sport, but it was a very Yankee-centric type of feel. But
Right.
now when you're comparing him to Barry Bonds, the greatest slugger of his generation, statistically the greatest slugger of all time, have the debate about steroids, whatever, but when you're comparing him to that, Steve, now you know you have something. And when you have Ohtani, who's a generational talent in terms of what he can do, when you have Soto, who kind of could be the bad guy as the mercenary, and then you have Judge, who is just the absolute beast of his generation at the plate, it feels like all 3 of these guys, in addition to some of the outside forces, all kind of have something for everyone in the card collecting hobby, right? Whether it be someone you root for, whether it be someone you admire, or you're just going off of the stats. I feel like having, even though there may be outside forces, again, having a big 3 that you could kind of make a reoccurring theme throughout the campaign, the 2025 campaign, that's, you guys know more than I feel like that's really good for the trade, though, right?
I mean, it is. Baseball's a little different, right? When it comes to values of cards and how things go.
It could vary so
People
much.
are always trying to buy that big upswing, and it has to do with guys that are up and coming. It's not necessarily
Established players.
Baseball doesn't move as much when a player's incredibly
Ohtani's
established.
numbers are actually coming down.
Right.
Yeah.
If you look at Ohtani's card numbers,
Yeah.
they're coming down.
And he's leading the league in home runs.
Yeah,
Let's-
so
he's
he's right. He's right on this point.
And so when it's the case, you've got to be able to forecast where guys are actually going to pop
Yeah.
and get you some stuff. And I'll give you some names because I think some of these are. Cal Riley, right? The catcher for the Mariners. We don't invest into catchers in baseball often. Right? But he's probably the guy at this point that if you're going to, you can. The guy can hit. The guy hits in the clutch. The guy drives in runs. And the guy calls a very good game, right? So because of that, he is going to be an established player. I think of him. I don't want to give this comparison because it's not fair. But Pudge Rodriguez.
I was thinking the same thing.
Right? He is probably as close to what Pudge Rodriguez was to his time period now to what this time period is. Even, look, for the catcher position for a long time, it's not been about how well the guy hit. It's been about how flashy his defense has been, right?
So by that,
because if that was the case, Contreras would be a household name on a regular basis.
That's a great point because I was about to ask, how did Piazza sell by comparison?
Right, Piazza because of the time period
and he's
team he was with, right? Team who he was with. Those two things really mattered.
Playing in the World Series, right?
Next name I'll mention to you is Corbin Carroll. Corbin Carroll had an absolute just bottom of his market.
Yeah,
and right now you're buying the mid. So I tell you right now, go out and buy your Corbin Carroll stuff because he is now here to stay. I think he's having that Bobby Witt resurgence that Bobby Witt had last year. I think that this year, that is him. So I think that, and look, that team, they're in a gauntlet division, and they're fourth in that division, and they're like 4 games back.
So let me ask you this. You gave a great breakdown there of up-and-coming players compared to established players to the point where the face of the game is actually losing sales right now in Ohtani.
Yeah.
What about a resurgent player? Not to, again, make this too Yankee focused, but Paul Goldschmidt is doing exactly what he needs to do.
Goldschmidt's market sailed.
And that's a former elite player who's now in the top market. Cody Bellinger, former elite player, kind of resurging in a top market right now. Again, up and down with Bellinger's career, but again, he's in the pinstripes now and he's being insanely productive. Do you see an uptick? Maybe not a great uptick, but do you see kind of a return of form somewhat in that case?
You need a 3, 4, 5 game stretch of home runs from those guys before you see that type thing, because everybody's going to attribute it to they play with Aaron Judge.
The protection.
Right?
Yeah.
That they hadn't played with Aaron Judge, and now they are, and then that's what they're getting, right?
Shockingly, their numbers pop back up.
Whereas, like, I could look at a guy, like, if you kind of want to talk about some of this stuff, when you start looking at guys like Kyle Schwarber, right?
Yeah.
Okay? Kyle Schwarber's a guy that, like, his market's never really been up. Man, he's always talked about. He's a lead highlight almost every single time the Phillies take the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, whatever it is. He's one of those guys that you might see a little uptick, but even with that, you won't see it.
And what about like Alonso or Lindor, established guys?
Alonso's a guy that could. Lindor, I think, is sailed.
Right.
Whereas Alonso, I think people are still kind of like, oh, well, if he does this, he could.
He's a commodity.
Right.
Yeah.
The guy that's probably established that's going to see the most uptick is going to be Fernando Tatis.
Yeah.
And the reason being is because his market, again, like I just mentioned about the Corbin Carroll market, it bottomed, right, with the whole PED, and all that stuff.
And he could return.
Now he's back. Now he's really showing the flashes. Now he's showing the Gold Glove stuff. Now he's showing all of these things in a position change, right? And all of this. So I think that's big. The other guys that I want to mention really quick that I think is important, Spencer Torkelson. If you've not been buying Spencer Torkelson, this guy, we all thought he was the better guy than Bobby Witt Jr.
Right.
Okay? And he is playing at a very, very high level. And then a guy that I hated to see do this, I knew he was going to do this and be this guy, James Wood with the Nationals. If you haven't bought your James Woods, you need to go out and get that right now.
Absolute stud.
Right? Those guys, these are guys that have some time in the league, that have played, that are making waves, and that you can now grab these guys at good values, and by the All-Star break, probably see 10 to 15% on your investment, maybe even more. Corbin Carroll's a guy I could argue you could see 30 to 45% if you bought right now.
So it seems there's a bit of a threshold to where you want to be established, but you don't want to peak to the point where your market could potentially sail or become stale. You want to get to the point where you're relevant enough to where you're interesting enough to where your name catches traction, but at the same time where you haven't peaked to where now there's no appeal to your market anyway. So those are the type of insights that this show is all about. I'm learning as we go along here, and it's awesome. Good buddy of the show, Michael Lugo, didn't join in on the comments today, but I just want to let you guys know he actually stopped by. This is on the Pokemon front rather than the sports card front, but he did a pull on his Instagram of the 151 pack with the Pokemon cards.
Yeah.
pulled out a nice Venusaur. I mean, I'm just spitballing here because I don't know that much about that particular, hobby. But at the same time, these are the type of things that you could get involved with, that you can immerse yourself in by checking out Game Day Sports Cards. Jimmy, really quick before we say goodbye, you mentioned last week a new store, a new location. Is that correct? Go ahead for those who didn't tune in. Go ahead and reiterate so they know where to find you.
Yeah, last of the month, end of